Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back to Storytime with Deacon Mike. I'm reading two stories from Laugh and Learn Bible for Kids. The two stories are Noah and the Flood and the Tower of Babel, or Babel. Let's read the first story. Adam and Eve had kids, and their kids had kids, and their kids had kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, great-great-grandkids, spreading all over this wild world, and sin was spreading with them. They were fighting, and they were stealing, and they were lying and hurting each other, making God's world an ugly place. Finally, God said, "Enough." It was time to start all over again. God decided to pick one person, one good person, to start his world over again. But who? In all that sinning and fighting and hurting, was anyone good and kind enough to trust with such an important job? Do you think there was? Yes. God chose a man named Noah. Noah was a righteous man. That means that he was a good man. He tried very hard to make the right choices, and he tried hard not to fight or steal or lie. Noah walked with God. That means that in a world where everyone was doing their own thing, Noah was always thinking about God, talking to God, listening to God. Noah was always ready to do whatever God asked. And oh yeah, there's one other thing we know about Noah. He was more than 500 years old. Yep, 500 years old. People lived a long time back then. Not only was Noah a righteous man who walked with God, but Noah had been practicing walking with God and listening for God's voice for more than 500 years. That's a long time. Deacon Mike's only 65 years old. 500 years, oh my goodness. So when God had a really big job to do, he knew who to call because he knew he had been listening for more than 500 years. So here's what happened. God said, "Hey Noah, build a boat." And Noah said, "What's a boat?" And God said, "It's a thing you can float in if there's a flood." And Noah said, "What's a flood?" And God said, "It's when water covers everything. It's why you need a boat." Noah said, "How big?" And God said, "Big enough for your family." And then Noah said, "And anything else?" And God said, "And some animals." Then Noah said, "How many animals?" And God said, guess what? All of them. At this point, Noah probably fainted. I would have. And God probably had to poke him with a stick to wake him up again. Then God gave him plans for building a boat. A very, very big boat. Noah and his family set to work building the boat so big it could hold all of them, plus 2 of every kind of animal there was on the earth. Building a boat that big took years and years, and Noah's neighbors probably came often to see him and laugh at him for building a boat when there was no water. But Noah didn't care about the laughing. He'd been walking with God for a long time, and he was going to keep on walking with God no matter what. Noah wanted to be God's friend, even if everyone else thought he was silly. Then you know what happened? One day, it started to rain. And when it did, the animals came from everywhere. Big animals, little animals, tall animals, and short animals. God sent the animals to Noah, and Noah packed them in his big, big boat. And it kept raining, harder and harder and harder, and suddenly the boat looked like a pretty good idea. God covered the land with water so that all the sinning and the fighting and the hurting would finally stop. All the fighting and the sinning and hurting died, but so did most of God's creation. It was a very sad time. It rained and poured for 40 days and 40 nights. Noah's big boat floated on the water for 50 days, then 60 days, then 100 days, and then after 150 days, the big boat was getting very, very stinky with all those animals. Have you ever been on a pig farm or in the elephant house at the zoo? Stinky like that, only 10 times worse. Then finally the water started to go down. Down, down, down. One day, at long last, Noah's big boat came to rest on the top of a mountain. And then God said, let's start again. So Noah and his family, plus a whole bunch of seasick animals, walked out of the big boat into a fresh, clean world. It was time to start again. Now here is a fun fact about the story of Noah. A cubit is a measurement, a unit of measurement often used in biblical times. It measures about 1.5 feet. The ark was 300 cubits long and 50 cubits wide and 30 cubits high. That's big enough to hold 1.5 football fields or 2 large airplanes. Can you imagine being in a boat that big with all those animals? So now here are a couple of questions. Why did God save Noah and his family from the flood? And then why do you think Noah ignored those who laughed at him about his big boat? So with that, we'll pray at the end of this story. Dear God, thank you for being faithful to Noah because he was faithful to you. We want to be faithful to you too. Amen. So our next story is called The Tower of Babel. It was a new start. The great flood had stopped all the fighting and cheating and lying. Now Noah and his kids had a new chance to live as God's friends, the way they had always tried to live, sharing love and kindness instead of meanness and hate. The first thing Noah did was to build an altar where he could give gifts to God. Noah gave gifts to God and thanked God for his new chance in this new world. God told Noah and his kids how he wanted them to live, and they promised they would do their best to live that way. And it went pretty well for a while. But then something happened. Noah's kids had kids, and their kids had kids, and their kids had kids, grandkids and great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids. They started building houses, and they built a whole city, and they were very proud of their city. What a great city we have built! What else can we build? Then someone asked the question, what if we built a tower that reached to the sky? Wouldn't that make us look strong? Building a city doesn't seem like a big deal, but building a tall tower does seem like a big deal, and it was a big deal. What they were really saying was this: if we all live in one place, we can protect ourselves, we can feed ourselves, and a great tower will make us feel strong. Then we won't need a strong God. We will be the strong ones. Remember, God didn't want the people to stay in one place. He wanted them to cover the whole world and make it like the Garden of Eden. As you remember, it's filled with beauty and order and plenty. He wanted his special creatures, his friends, to rely on him for safety and food. He wanted them to trust him in his strength, not on their own, and to build things together with him, not on their own. So these great-great-grandkids of Noah began building their mighty tower in the sky. God did something interesting. When they built that tower, he scrambled their words. What do I mean when I say scrambled? Have you ever had scrambled eggs? When you mix them all up? Well, that's what happened. God gave them different languages so they didn't understand each other. If they couldn't understand each other, they couldn't work to finish their tower. And that's what happened. And sure enough, since they couldn't understand each other, different groups and families wandered off from the city to live in different parts of the world, just like God wanted them to do. Little cities sprouted up all over. The great tower never got built. So, did all the people say they were sorry for trying to live without God? Did they trust God again, stop sinning, and start spreading beauty and order and plenty throughout the world? Not exactly. Wherever there were groups of people living together, there was sin. More fighting, more cheating, more lying, and more hurting. Even with their second chance, the grandkids and great-grandkids of Noah made the same mistake that Adam and Eve had made long before. They stopped listening to God and started listening to that other voice, the voice of that old sneaky snake. You won't be happy if God is in charge. You should be in charge instead. That's the voice of the snake. God saw his favorite creatures hurting each other and wandering farther and farther from him. So God knew it was time for his great rescue plan, a plan that didn't start with a huge flood or a big boat. The plan started with a single person, and the guy was named Abram. And that's who we'll be reading about the next time you join me. A couple of interesting facts. Was the Tower of Babel where all languages started? Because the people disobeyed, God scrambled their words. They couldn't understand each other. Some Bible leaders believe this is the origin of all languages, which forced people to live in different parts of the world, just like God wanted. So why was it a big deal for the people to build a tall tower in the first place? Think about that. And then why did God scramble their words? So we'll end this one with another prayer. Dear God, help us to quiet the voices that say we should trust our own strength instead of yours. We want everything we say and do to bring glory to you. Amen. And until next time when we hear the story of Abram, bye, boys and girls.